Belloogaloo here, another Topic of the Week video. Now, if you've been following my updates on my community posts, you'll know that I'm working on a big Attack on Titan video, rewriting the whole series. That video has been taking a lot longer to make than I thought it would. I initially thought it would just take a few weeks. It's been taking a lot longer. And I know a lot of people have said they'd be fine with me just taking my time on whatever video I'm working on. But I would feel bad if I would go months on end if this ends up taking that long without putting anything out. So I thought I would occasionally put out some smaller videos like this one while I'm working on this big, massive project. So this week's topic was submitted by the Wise Wolf in the Discord, and his topic is: where do you think the Assassin's Creed series went wrong? Most agree it was after Assassin's Creed 2, and how it lost its identity and became, well, whatever Ubisoft parades around as it. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting topic, and I know I haven't really talked about this as much, but I was actually kind of a fan of Assassin's Creed back in the day. And I lost interest of it, especially after Brotherhood, and something I'm going to end up discussing in this video. But to get down to why this series lost its identity and what happened, you can start this off by something that happened way back when the series initially exploded in popularity after Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 1 was big, but Assassin's Creed 2 came in and it improved on everything, was so much better. It had a way more popular protagonist. Ezio was wildly popular. And that's why they ended up spinning him off into his own trilogy. Now, I don't know how many people know this, and I remember this used to be a pretty commonly known fact amongst Assassin's Creed fans. But, for anyone who doesn't know, Assassin's Creed was going to be a trilogy. It was going to have 3 games. You were going to have Assassin's Creed 1, then Assassin's Creed 2, and then Assassin's Creed 3, and that was going to be the series. It's a little hard to fathom now, since Assassin's Creed has a reputation for being pumped out like crazy. But once upon a time, it was initially going to be a trilogy. But after the series got wildly successful, Ubisoft was like, we want infinite games for infinite money. And then the initial creator ended up leaving. Putting it lightly. So yeah, Assassin's Creed suddenly had every plan it had thrown out the window, and instead of going to Assassin's Creed 3 after Assassin's Creed 2, we got Brotherhood, we got Revelation, and then the series ended up having a whole bunch of other titles. Far cry from just having 3 games. Now, that's pretty simple to explain. Greedy corporation comes in and ruins a plan from a creative, individual, Tale as old as time. But that doesn't really cover all of the details of it. Because sure, you can give the basics of why, but let's talk a little bit more about that. For example, one of the big things that came about at the end of Brotherhood was the death of longtime character Lucy Stillman, who was in Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. So she was actually revealed to be an assassin double agent who had infiltrated Absurdities. She helps Desmond escape in Assassin's Creed 2. She becomes one of your main allies. And then in Brotherhood, which is the first game that was made after things totally changed, she's killed off at the very end when Desmond is controlled. And it's like, oh my gosh, this big shocking moment. And then the next game doesn't explain it. There's a DLC for Revelation that goes, oh, by the way, Lucy was actually a Templar and she was a triple agent the whole time. She was actually evil and that's why she was killed. And to be perfectly honest, this didn't sit well with a lot of people. Rightfully so. I mean, this is not something that was planned from the beginning. I mean, the fact that it took them so long to come up with any explanation for this. It's not just the next game, it's the DLC for the next game that a lot of people didn't play, so a lot of people didn't even know this detail, and they were just sitting there wondering, why did Lucy die? Now, to really dig into this, you have to kind of look at Lucy's voice actress, Kristen Bell. Yes, that Kristen Bell. She was the voice actress and face model for Lucy. Now this gets a little complicated because we, to this day, do not have a flat-out straight answer on why she left the series. Now, she was signed on for a 3-game contract, which makes sense if this whole series was planned from the beginning to be a trilogy. If you have her signing on for 3 games, then of course she would do her 3 games, and with Assassin's Creed 3 the series is done, and she would probably move on to do whatever. You know, she would go on to do bigger roles in movies, and she was Anna in Frozen. You know, well-known career, right? But that gets complicated when they decided to change the series from being a trilogy into an ongoing series. And that one change had a domino effect that affected a bunch of things. Now, if you look into why Kristen Bell left the Assassin's Creed series and why Lucy was killed off, you'll find a few vague answers. I mean, the closest we get to someone trying to come up with a straight answer is from...
So when I was initially recording this video, I actually got it wrong who said this. I had initially believed that it was a Ubisoft executive who had said this because when I was doing my research, I saw someone mistakenly attribute this quote to a Ubisoft executive. It was not. It was actually Patrice Désilets, the creator of Assassin's Creed, who said this. It doesn't change my point, but I just wanted to make sure that I made that correction.
Saying, well, she just demanded insane royalties instead of being paid, so then we killed her off and didn't tell her? Huh. Now, I don't blindly believe anything that's said.
Again, I referenced the Ubisoft executive. It was Patrice Désilets who said this, not a random Ubisoft executive. To be fair, I do believe what he's saying, though it really makes him look terrible. Especially when he was acting so childish and petty. And even though he is the creator of Assassin's Creed, even if he's telling the truth, and Kristen Bell did say this, it's really not a good look for him to be so petty and childish, to kill off her character without telling her just because he was annoyed that she wanted royalties. And I can understand if he was frustrated at the time that Ubisoft had forced the series to go annual against his wishes, and while that may explain why he did what he did and why he may not have felt as bad of killing off a major character right before he left the series, it still doesn't excuse what he did with Lucy's character out of spite.
And from what I've seen, Kristen Bell didn't have any direct explanation to say of why she didn't come back to the series. But, you know, if you look at it, there's been people speculating, oh, well, you know, she wanted to go on and focus on her movie career, so she left, you know, Assassin's Creed. Which I guess would make sense, especially if she was already planning to just go for 3 games. But my personal speculation on this, and again, I want to stress, this is my personal speculation. I think what happened is when she got the job, she signed on for 3 games. That was it, and afterwards she was probably going to go back and focusing on movies, do other big voice work with bigger projects like Frozen, you know. And then once the 3 games were up, because Brotherhood became the 3rd game instead of Assassin's Creed 3, there was naturally going to be negotiations for contracts. I'm sure every single voice actor had signed on to a specific contract in the beginning. Once that was up, they would probably renegotiate this. I'm sure the same thing happened with Nolan North as Desmond. Now, what probably happened was, again, my speculation, is that when they went to Kristen Bell, they were like, okay, we're going to do negotiations. And she was like, okay, well, I signed on for 3 games, and if you want to do more, you're going to have to pay me more, because I already had plans. And then they were like, well, we don't want to pay you. And I was like, all right, fine. And then they killed off her character, and then after the fact justified it by making her evil, kind of torching her character to the ground and making it so that you wouldn't really want to see more of Lucy, in all honesty. And a lot of people who were really upset about this weren't particularly happy. Regardless, and I want to say that even if
we take the worst possible interpretation of this,
and that she went full tilt diva and was just demanding royalties for the game's sales instead of just getting a flat payment. And she was being totally crazy and unreasonable. Why not just recast her? I don't see why you wouldn't do that. This has happened in plenty of other series. And yes, and there's also a complication to this, in the fact that Kristen Bell wasn't just the voice actress, but also the face model. They based Lucy's look on Kristen Bell, which is another reason why I will continue to say that video games should stop literally just making characters look like actors instead of being, inspired by actors and whatever, because you always run into so many problems. But here's the thing. Then redo Lucy's model, make her look legally distinct, and then get a new voice actress that sounds as close as you can get to Kristen Bell. Problem solved. Continue on with Lucy as a character. You don't even have to deal with Kristen Bell ever again. As far as I'm aware, she doesn't seem to have any deep investment in the series and hasn't really said anything about this, so it seems like she's not someone who deeply cared about everything. So it's just like, just get someone new. And it's this petty, it's the petty reaction. The whole, she didn't want to play ball with us, so let's kill her character off and make her evil. I mean, and even if she was full tilt diva, then there are ways to handle this without derailing your own story. Because there are a lot of people who actually lost heavy amounts of interest when that happened in the modern day story of Assassin's Creed. Which, and I'm going to keep talking about this a little bit more, I think that Ubisoft themselves lost interest in the modern day story of Assassin's Creed. I mean, when people really liked Lucy, especially after Assassin's Creed 2, and she wasn't just a really lovable, ally. She'd also been very heavily set up as Desmond's love interest, and a lot of people were really invested in her character. And when she was killed off, people were like, "Oh, that sucks. Now I'm not particularly interested in this, anymore."
And what makes Lucy's death even more odd is just how weirdly out of place it is. She doesn't have any speaking lines for that last part of Brotherhood. And she doesn't say anything after she gets unfrozen after being stabbed, which is a little weird in a series where people are kind of known for going on rants after they get stabbed before dying. Once you understand the behind-the-scenes stuff involved with Patrice Désilets and Kristen Bell, it makes some more sense if you look at this from the perspective that she had already recorded all of her lines, and then, after the fact, Patrice Désilets made the decision to kill her off, maybe just cut out some of her lines at the end and just changed it so that she got killed. Which would make a lot more sense with her not speaking at all. And even Sean and Rebecca don't have a reaction to what happened. I mean, everyone got unfrozen and we don't get a reaction from them. It really feels slapped in. Like, there was supposed to be a different ending, but then Patrice Désilets decided to kill off Lucy over personal drama behind the scenes. And then, it's weird that Brotherhood just ends so abruptly. In Assassin's Creed 2, there was more dialogue that happened afterwards. There was more stuff going on during the credits, but with Brotherhood, it's just a hard cut. Oh, no reactions, no nothing? All you get are two completely new characters talking and reacting to this, who aren't in the main group that was there when Desmond stabbed Lucy. The ending of Brotherhood feels like it was something that was changed at the last minute. And then Patrice Désilets was on his way out. He left after Brotherhood. And then you have other people who have to come in and then address what happened at the end of Brotherhood. Now, there's an interesting little tidbit that I just discovered not too long ago. And it's a cut line from Subject 16, Clay, from Assassin's Creed Revelations. Listen to this.
Go, get out! If you hurry, you might save her. Lucy might live, and I might forgive you, you coward.
Now that's odd. That's talking about saving Lucy. And you know what? I'm speculating, and again, this is my own speculation on this. I think that they had put this in because there was an idea of maybe bringing Lucy back. Maybe they got Kristen Bell back. Maybe they tried. Maybe they eventually didn't try and gave up on it. I don't know. But I think that they had this idea of maybe like putting her in a coma. Saying that, oh, well, you know, she got stabbed, but she's not dead. She's alive, but she's in critical condition. She's in a coma. And you just have her off screen for the game. So you don't have to deal with, you know, anything related to Kristen Bell until they could maybe get her back. Ultimately, this obviously wouldn't have panned out. And then that's why they waited until the DLC to do any kind of explanation. Oh, well, you know, she was actually this triple agent. She was an assassin posing as a Templar who turned to the Templars, and she posed as an assassin, but she's actually a Templar. With her allegiance being so convoluted, even Revolver Ocelot would say, wow, maybe you need to chill out there. And then once that explanation came out, everything about Lucy was sealed, right? And then retroactively, the explanation became, oh, well, the reason why Juno made Desmond kill Lucy was because she was a Templar and she was bad. Except that was an explanation that you had to wait a while to get. Not even in the next game, but the DLC of the next game. And it really strikes me as odd. And regardless of what anyone thinks, I think it's become abundantly clear that this whole idea that Lucy was planned to be evil the whole time, and, oh, her death was already a planned part of the story, was totally bunk. With Patrice Désilets admitting that he killed off Lucy effectively on a whim over petty drama, well, that means it obviously wasn't a narrative reason why he killed her. It was a personal one, meaning that wasn't a part of his plan for the story. And again, you can feel that with the ending of Brotherhood being so weird, with Lucy just not talking, even after being stabbed, where she doesn't even go, you know, or go, why did you do this, or nothing, no reaction at all. And then that, along with the cut dialogue from Clay, really cements the idea for me that her being a Templar was absolutely not something that was a thing until that DLC established it, trying to make sense of what had happened in the games because of what Patrice Désilets did. So clearly none of this was planned, and you just have a bunch of poor decisions made consistently, and a bunch of behind-the-scenes issues being the reason, really, why everything went off the rails with Lucy, and frankly, I think, with the modern-day story. And then, of course, with Patrice Désilets leaving, you had other people who had to come in and try to figure things out, and then they have the slave drivers, Ubisoft, rushing them to make a game on a yearly basis, so it's just like, go, just do something. And it's really unfortunate that it ended up like this. And I think Lucy's death really sticks out as what I believe to be the real start of the downfall. Like, regardless of any other issues, I feel like that really is a big sign of problems. When a major character is killed off for petty behind-the-scenes reasons, which then throws the story out of whack, and that just causes even more problems going forward.
And then this would get compounded later when they killed Desmond, their main protagonist. And it feels like once the plan for a trilogy was thrown out the window, you couldn't have a coherent end of the story with Assassin's Creed 3. I mean, unless they did like the Kingdom Hearts method of you have first story, second story, and you've got like 8 different sidequels, you know, and midquels and stuff, and then you'd have Assassin's Creed 3 at the end. But then people would probably be a little annoyed that they would have to wait so long for that. But it feels like Desmond's death, like, I don't know if maybe this was also because Nolan North was getting too expensive and they just didn't want to deal with him, you know, or if they were just like, okay, we don't want to deal with a coherent story with a coherent protagonist. let's just get rid of the main characters. We got rid of Lucy, let's get rid of Desmond. I think this was meant to decentralize the story so that you didn't have it focused on a particular protagonist, so that then they can just do whatever. You can have nondescript, faceless, nameless protagonists plug into the Animus, and then they can focus on the parts that they really want to do, which is the, parts of history and specific locations. Let's go to France. Let's go to in the Industrial Revolution, England, and let's go to all these other different areas, but let's not focus as much on the main modern day plot, which was where everything was set within and everything was leading to. It's the whole point they went into the Animus in the first place, was to learn about stuff in the past that can be applied to the current time, to find different artifacts, to figure out stuff that happened, yada yada yada. It feels like they just straight up lost interest in that, so instead of having a coherent plot now, you have a little bit more of a disconnected plot that exists only so they can pump out more Assassin's Creed games.
If Lucy's death was the first major sign of things going wrong, then Desmond's death is the nail in the coffin. It truly is the signifier that they really didn't care about this modern day story at all. It seems like it's trying to wrap up things with the end of the world plot and then go, okay, yeah, stuff is happening and Desmond's gone. Okay, all right. He still technically exists, with his consciousness and whatever. He's dead. That's the important part. And they try to set up stuff with Juno, but then they lose interest in that and they don't even resolve that in the games. That gets resolved in a comic. It's abundantly clear that they really just stopped caring about this plot. Which is why the next several games had faceless, nameless nobodies as your protagonists. And then when they tried to do Layla later, they squandered that by getting rid of her too.
Yeah, and then you also have the problem where the series has leaned far too heavily into fantasy in modern times. I mean, there's always been a degree of fantasy regardless, but it was mostly sci-fi, right? Even a lot of the magical stuff, like the artifacts, it was basically saying this is just really advanced technology. And it feels like they're trying to lean more into the fantasy. And to be perfectly honest, if you want to take like the Assassin's Creed style and then just add a bunch of fantasy crazy stuff to it, then I would say go full tilt with that and make it a new series. I mean, they've done this before with different video games over the years. I mean, not Ubisoft's. I'm not just talking about Ubisoft specifically. But, like, say, the Devil May Cry series was born from Resident Evil. Because, hey, this started getting a little too action-y. So they just went full bore with the action and made Devil May Cry its own thing. You could have spawned an entirely new franchise that people could get really into. But, you gotta slap on that Assassin's Creed title for brand recognition. And it really settles it when it comes to why did the series lose its way? Well, to be perfectly honest, greedy corporation.
We've got to have money.
And really, it comes down to a lack of any kind of coherent plan. And I also want to talk about, and I want to round this topic off with talking about ways they could have done this better. Because they could have done this better. Now, okay, go back to after Assassin's Creed 2. Alright. We want to make this series run just until we're done making these games, right? Until they stop printing money. So, here's what you do. You gotta change the plan, right? That's the natural part. If you don't have the original creator, if he doesn't want to stick around for this, okay. What you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to bring in people who know what they're doing, right? You need to at least have a head writer overseeing the different stories in order to make sure you have a coherent narrative. Of course, you'd have other writers doing the individual games and stuff, but you need to have a coherent vision. And you need to have, strong coordination between the developers and writers. Then you need to make sure you come up with a plan. And I would say at this point, plan out which games you want to do. You could plan out like 20 different games. Pick out what period of time and location you want for each game, and then make these different games. And then, of course, you're going to have to stretch out the whole story to go around a little bit longer than it initially planned to, which is fine, because that gives you time to really spend more time with the characters and develop the world.
You can spend more time dealing with Desmond's issues with the bleeding effect and figuring out ways to solve that. You can spend more time with Desmond interacting with his father, really delving into that and building on that relationship more than just, a couple of games, really. Delve more into Desmond's past, especially with his father. Have Desmond's father see him grow into a master assassin.
And then, of course, I would even go so far as to say, yes, don't make everything focus on Desmond. But don't get rid of him. Keep Lucy. Keep Desmond. If you lose Kristen Bell, change the voice actress, make her face legally distinct, and keep going. And then, bring in new characters as protagonists of different games, as people that, just like what happened with Desmond, say your ancestors were assassins, or maybe their ancestors were Templars. Ooh, that could be interesting. And they knew something that happened 500 years ago. That's important to what we're doing now. So you send these people into the Animus, and you can spend time over the course of multiple games sort of building up this assassin army with all these characters. And you get to see Desmond move from the novice to moving into more of a mentor role as an assassin, and show him, what was established in Assassin's Creed 2 is him developing more real-world skills through the bleeding effect. Then continue that and show Desmond move from just being a guy who got recruited by the assassins to being one of the main assassins in their faction. And you can see him and Lucy, and them being like their main assassins as the mentors to these new ones. And then say, when it gets down to the big storyline, then we take control of Desmond again. Like, you could have it so that, Assassin's Creed, like the numbered sequels, is when you control Desmond or something like that. So that you have all these other characters you're bringing in, so that if you want to decentralize it, so it's not just focused on Desmond, and he's just sort of like the main character of the series, but he's not the only protagonist, you can do that. And if you followed that basic idea with a planned out, you can plan out 20 games and figure out what you want to do over the course of this story. You can actually make this all work without the series running totally off the rails.
You can deal with the whole end of the world plot, which may be more complicated than just solving the end of the world plot with a single game. Maybe there's different things that you need to do. Maybe saving the world from one catastrophe causes more problems that they need to fix. Maybe they can deal with all of this and then something else comes up.
And you can even have Abstergo defeated, and then you can conclude that storyline and maybe just do what like other series would do, create a new overarching story. Maybe there are other Templar factions that come up. Maybe there's strife within the Assassins faction. Maybe you have assassins who are disagreeing with what they want to do, so you have like a civil war. So Desmond and Lucy and their group of assassins are now fighting against other assassins.
You can have more complications of stuff from the first civilization. Maybe there are more messages, more prophecies, more stuff to deal with from the different people who had left messages, like what Minerva did at the end of Assassin's Creed 2.
And these are just spitballing ideas. I haven't spent a great deal of time thinking about this, but these are just ideas that I'm coming up with of stuff you could do if you had to extend the series past, alright, we gotta fight Abstergo and stop the Templars.
Gotta prevent the world from being destroyed in some sort of catastrophe.
Okay, we did that. Now what? If you need to run this series until it stops printing money, then come up with a long-term strategy. Because what they came up with was a very short-term strategy. And it didn't work. And there's a reason why, even if Assassin's Creed games still sell, a lot of people just aren't as invested in the overarching story anymore, which is kind of a thing that really drove the series. That was the whole point, really. The stuff that happened in the real world may not be as cool or iconic as a lot of the period timelines that they go to. Going to see 15th, hundreds Italy or something, or you know, going to ancient Egypt or whatever. Like, yeah, that may not be as cool, but it would have been cool to actually continue that and do it right and actually deal with stuff in the real world. Heck, you could even have Desmond and Lucy like going off and doing real world missions while these new characters were doing the past missions. Like, okay, we introduced Steve, and
His ancestor is Arno.
so that game, he's the one going back in time to revisit those memories, and you got like Desmond doing these real world stuff that's sort of progressing the overarching plot. It does the job of decentralizing things so that not everything focuses on a particular protagonist, but it also gives you enough freedom without locking you into, okay, we don't have a protagonist anymore, now what do we do? And as long as you knew what you were doing and you have some people who can write competent stories that know how to stretch this out to give you more content, like genuine good content, to really flesh a lot of these characters out and flesh the overarching story, they could have made it work. And the sad part is they didn't think about that. They didn't think about the long-term strategies because they wanted that money. And it really is a shame, because even if Assassin's Creed lost its initial plan and it was no longer a trilogy, they still could have made it work, and it still could have been an enduring franchise. But alas. So that's really all I wanted to talk about for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can either comment below if you're on YouTube. If you're on Tumblr, you can send me an ask, but topic : then whatever topic you want me to talk about, or you can go to the topic submissions channel in the Discord and submit a topic there. Just make sure to follow the rules I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So what are your thoughts on the Assassin's Creed series? Do you have any different ideas about why it went wrong? Please comment below. And thank you for watching.